Do you really think a few tuition payments buy you gratitude? You're not some noble savior. You're just an HVS tech playing hero, clinging to receipts to feel important. That's what Vanessa said to my face, right after I laid out every document, every cent I'd ever covered for her. It didn't just sting. It slapped like truth twisted into venom, stripping every sacrifice of meaning in a single breath. If you've ever been dismissed by your own family, if your quiet support was twisted into control, or your hard-earned help was met with silence and shame, stick around. This story is ours. I had just finished wrapping up my last repair job of the day. A stubborn old furnace in a downtown duplex that wheezed like it had asthma. The wind outside had picked up, cutting through my coat as I loaded my tool bag into the back of the truck. The cold was the kind that seeped into your bones, and I was looking forward to nothing more than a long shower and a quiet night with my dog and a bottle of wine. Maybe even pick up a nice Pinot Noir to bring for Thanksgiving dinner. My phone buzzed just as I was about to pull out of the lot. I answered it on Bluetooth, one hand on the wheel. "Hey, Mom," I said, still distracted, watching a man hurry past in a raincoat too thin for Seattle in late November. There was a pause on the other end. I didn't think anything of it. Janice Morgan always measured her words. "Riley," she began, too formally. "I wanted to call before things got too close to the holiday." I furrowed my brow. "Okay?" "Well, Vanessa's boyfriend's parents are coming this year," she continued, her voice tight. "It's going to be more of a formal setting. We thought maybe it might be best if you didn't come this time." I didn't speak right away. My fingers clenched the steering wheel as I merged onto the highway. "Best for who?" I asked quietly. "I just mean, Vanessa's trying to make a certain impression. You know how it is. These people are from Palo Alto. Her boyfriend's father is a neurosurgeon, for goodness sake. And I run my own business," I said, flat. "A successful one." "Yes, of course," she added quickly. "But HVAC isn't, well, it's not always understood in those circles. It's very blue-collar and, I snapped. "Say it, Mom." She exhaled into the line as if the burden of my disappointment was hers to carry. "I don't want to fight, Riley. This is just how things are. Don't make this into a bigger issue than it needs to be." The call dropped into silence after that, except for the hum of the tires against wet pavement. I didn't go home. I parked in the lot of an all-night grocery store, sitting motionless with the bottle of wine I'd bought still cradled in the passenger seat. It wasn't just the words. It was the weight behind them. The years of Vanessa making subtle digs about my grease-stained coveralls or my calloused hands. The time she introduced me at her engagement party as just family. I'd smiled through it all, convinced myself I was reading too much into things. Turns out I wasn't. The streetlights above me flickered, casting a dull orange hue over the dashboard. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Rachel, my cousin. "I overheard Vanessa telling your mother she didn't want you there because she didn't want them to know we came from a working-class family." The words slapped harder than the wind outside. My thumb hovered over the screen for a while, not replying. I had covered Rachel's first semester when her mom lost her job. Paid Vanessa's deposit when she nearly lost her apartment after a shopping spree went south. And now I wasn't good enough to sit at the same damn table? I started the engine but didn't drive off. The cold wasn't just outside now. It had crawled in, settled in my chest. Back in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen counter, the wine untouched. My laptop was open, the tuition payment portal blinking back at me. $21,500 due. I stared at the screen. My hand hovered above the trackpad, unmoving. She erased me from the dinner table. So I erased my name from her future. Thanksgiving morning crept in like any other Thursday, except quieter. Hollow, almost. My apartment was cold, not from the lack of heat, but from the absence of ritual. No smells of rosemary or cinnamon, no clatter of serving dishes or clinking glasses. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional groan of plumbing from upstairs. I made myself a plate of reheated pasta and sat at the table alone. The chair across from me remained empty, like it always did, but today it felt pointed. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Rachel. They didn't even mention your name at dinner. I walked out after the first toast. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down beside my fork. I didn't reply. I didn't want her to carry the guilt, but I also couldn't keep reassuring people that I was fine when I was unraveling in silence. Between bites, memories surfaced like bitter herbs. Vanessa deflecting when someone asked what I did for work. Oh, Riley runs a small business, she'd say with a shrug, eyes darting away. That time at her bridal shower when I arrived straight from a furnace job and she introduced me last, as if my dirt-stained jeans were an embarrassment she couldn't scrub away. It had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I opened my laptop and logged back into the university portal. The same screen blinked at me. Next payment due, $21,500 winter term tuition. My cursor hovered over the Manage Payment Methods tab. My heart was pounding, but not from guilt, from clarity. Click. Delete payment method. Confirm. Done. I leaned back in my chair. No confetti, no thunderclap. Just a strange, quiet feeling, like I'd finally taken a breath after holding it for years. The phone rang. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know. I answered anyway. Riley, Janice began, already half exasperated, half poised for a guilt-laden monologue. Vanessa just told me the payment didn't go through. Did something happen with your account? I kept my voice steady. Nope. I took it off. Thought it was best. Silence. I could hear her gears turning. You, what? She asked, as if I'd spoken in another language. You disinvited me from Thanksgiving. I'm just returning the favor. Riley, don't be dramatic. You know this is different. Is it? I said calmly. Because it feels exactly the same. Selective inclusion. Conditional love. I just removed the conditions. She exhaled sharply. We're family. We look out for each other. I almost laughed. Funny how that word only applies when you're taking, never when I'm asking for basic respect. You know how hard Vanessa has worked. Do you really want to sabotage her future? I glanced at my half-eaten plate. The pasta was cold now. Janice, for years I've been covering things no one even bothered to say thank you for. Tuition, rent, Rachel's books, groceries during the pandemic. And not once did any of you ask if I was okay. I paused. I'm not cruel. I'm just done being disposable. She started to speak again, but I cut her off. I have to go. And then, for the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother. There was no dramatic swell of emotion, no tears, just a sudden, almost startling stillness, the kind that follows a storm. I didn't move for a while. Let the silence settle around me like a heavy quilt. Then I reached for my wine, took a slow sip, and allowed myself a moment of peace. Another buzz. Voicemail. I tapped to listen, but didn't raise the phone to my ear. Vanessa's voice poured through the speaker, shrill and furious. You ruined everything. I can't enroll without your payment. You couldn't wait until after finals? What is wrong with you? I didn't reply. I turned the phone face down on the table and let it ring itself into silence. She herself turned into the victim and me into the villain. And the worst part? People believed her. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the office Monday morning was the chill. Not from the temperature, it was a bright, brittle morning in Seattle, but from the way my receptionist avoided eye contact as I passed her desk. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and lemon cleaner, and the usually warm hum of conversation in the back office was replaced by silence. Marcus popped his head out of the break room. Morning, he said, voice uncertain. Hey, I replied, hanging up my coat. I tried to sound normal, neutral, but even I could hear the tension in my own voice. He hesitated, then stepped out with a mug in hand. You doing okay? I didn't answer right away. I went to my desk, woke up the monitor, and opened the appointment dashboard. The 9 a.m. slot blinked. Diana R., Radiant Lane, heating check, one of our regulars. I clicked into the notes to double-check the equipment history, but what I saw stopped me cold. Didn't expect you to just abandon your sister like that. Text message from Diana, 7:48 a.m. I leaned back, phone already buzzing on the desk. Another message. Then another. I opened Instagram and found the post within seconds. Vanessa's profile, perfectly curated like always, featured a photo of her in soft lighting, holding a coffee mug with one hand, eyes cast thoughtfully to the side. The caption read, "Some people only love you when they can control you. Stay strong. Family means everything, even when they turn their backs on you. Growth, healing, chosen family." The comment section was a battlefield, and I was losing. You don't deserve that. Keep shining. Cutting toxic people is healthy. It's always the closest ones that hurt us most. Stay strong, Queen. Dozens of variations on the same theme. Vanessa, the wounded younger sister. Me, the invisible hand of oppression. Marcus glanced over my shoulder, then quickly looked away. "You know," he said, his voice cautious. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, but I'm here if you need to talk." I closed the app. My hand was shaking slightly. Not with hurt, with anger. "Thanks," I murmured. "I'm fine." He nodded slowly and backed away, sensing the storm I was trying to contain. The next message came from Rachel. Screenshots, group chat threads. Vanessa had been working overtime. She bailed on me without warning, after everything I did for her. I guess working with ductwork makes you cold inside too. I never asked for money. I just asked for support. Each sentence was carefully crafted to twist the knife while hiding the hand. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My reflection looked back at me in the glass. Tight-lipped, steady-eyed. Enough. I grabbed my jacket and keys. Heading out, I told Marcus. "Everything okay?" He asked again. "Not yet," I said. "But it will be." The drive to Vanessa's apartment was a quiet blur. Familiar streets blurred past my window, my mind already ahead of me, rehearsing what I needed to say and unlearning the instinct to apologize. When I arrived, I stood outside her building for a moment. The buzz of city noise surrounded me. Traffic, distant barking, someone yelling 2 blocks down. I stared at the door buzzer, then hit her number. No answer. I waited. Then climbed the stairs. Apartment 3B. I knocked once, hard. Footsteps inside. Then the sound of the chain sliding free. Vanessa opened the door in leggings and a sweatshirt that looked intentionally tousled, like a stylist had orchestrated it. Her hair was half done, eyes sharp behind feigned surprise. "Oh, look who finally showed up," she said, tilting her head with a smirk. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. "You've said your piece online. Now you're going to hear mine." "You said I never helped you? Let me show you every cent I gave." Vanessa blinked, caught off guard as I stepped into her apartment without waiting. The place was exactly as I remembered. Modern, minimal, expensive in the ways that screamed for validation. A faux fur throw was draped over the back of the couch like an Instagram prop, and a tray of untouched charcuterie sat on the kitchen island, looking curated rather than eaten. I walked past her, my boots thudding against the hardwood, and dropped the manila folder onto her marble countertop. The sound echoed louder than I expected, maybe because it carried weight. Real weight. "What's this?" she asked, arms folded, voice sharp. "Receipts," I said. "Since you've decided to rewrite history, I thought I'd bring the footnotes." Liam appeared from the hallway, barefoot and visibly uncomfortable. He had that look of someone realizing he'd walked into a live grenade and wasn't quite sure where the shrapnel would fly. He gave me a polite nod but said nothing. I nodded back. Vanessa hesitated, then flipped the folder open. Inside were printed PDFs, labeled and time-stamped. Copies of every tuition payment I'd made to Seattle Pacific University over the past 4 years. Screenshots of confirmation emails, payment breakdowns, even the auto-renew setup tied to my old credit card. All under my name. "You kept these?" she asked, face tightening. "You're welcome." She slapped the folder shut. "So what? You wanted control. That's all this was. Power over me." "No," I said, calm. I leaned back against the counter. "I wanted you to have a future. You decided entitlement was easier than gratitude." Vanessa scoffed, but it came out thinner than usual. Her voice had lost its edge. "You told people I abandoned you, that I bailed." I looked her straight in the eye. "You cut me out of Thanksgiving like I was some shameful cousin from the boonies. Then you went online and cried victim. But I stayed quiet. For a while." She crossed her arms, jaw set, lips pursed like a child caught mid-lie. "You can't prove intent," she muttered too quickly. "This isn't court," I replied, but I brought proof anyway. Liam finally moved closer, placing a hand on the back of one of the bar stools. His brow was furrowed. "Vanessa," he said, his voice low but steady. "Is this true?" Silence. She didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't deny. Just silence. Liam's hand dropped from the stool like it had suddenly burned him. "I stood up for you," he added. "I defended you. To my parents, to my friends." More silence. I turned to leave, stopping at the doorway. "One more thing," I said, my voice quiet but final. "Lie about me in public again. And I'll make those receipts public too." Vanessa's eyes flashed, but still she said nothing. Outside, the night air slapped me awake. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had been until I was back in my truck, engine purring softly. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. I felt clean, like dust had finally settled. The phone buzzed in my cup holder. "Mia, assistant." "Something's up. Marcus just kicked someone out of the shop. You might want to come in early." I stared at the message, thumb hovering. Somehow, I knew Vanessa's mess wouldn't stay contained to her apartment. She came to my workplace to finish what she started. But this time, I wasn't alone. The morning buzzed with the usual rhythm. Coils humming, air compressors thudding, keyboards clicking lightly in the front office. I had just handed a service ticket to Mia when the bell above the door gave its polite ding. I looked up and felt the air shift. Vanessa. She stepped in with the fire of someone who had practiced this entrance in the mirror. Perfect hair, trench coat draped like armor, a sharp purse slung over her shoulder like it contained war plans. The shop fell into a hush. "Riley," she said, loud enough to cut through conversation. "We need to talk. Now." I didn't move. "This is a place of business." "I don't care." She tossed her purse onto the reception counter. "You owe me an apology." Mia looked at me, wide-eyed. Marcus stood up slowly from the break room doorway. A client seated in the waiting area shifted uncomfortably in her chair, pretending to read a service pamphlet. "You're making a scene," I said, voice even. "And you don't belong here." Vanessa didn't flinch. "You abandoned your own sister for money. That's not something you just walk away from." "You're not here for clarity," I said. "You're here to control the story again, but you don't get to do that anymore." Her voice rose. "You made me look like a liar." "You are a liar," Marcus cut in, stepping beside me. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to leave. Now." Vanessa turned to him, incredulous. "Excuse me? Do you even know what she did to me?" "I know what she's done for you," he said simply, "and I've seen the receipts." I heard the door chime again. This time, Liam. He walked in quietly, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't even glance at Vanessa. "Liam," she said, relief flooding her voice. Tell them what she's—" "I'm here for Riley," he said, cutting her off. Calm, steady, absolute. The words didn't shout. They landed like a verdict. Vanessa looked at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. Her face crumpled, not with sadness, but with disbelief, with the sudden realization that her stage had no audience. Two clients at the front had stopped pretending to scroll through their phones. They were watching now. Through the wide, spotless glass walls that wrapped around my shop, passers-by had slowed, sensing drama. I turned toward them, toward all of them. "This," I said clearly, "is what entitlement looks like when it's exposed." Nobody spoke, just the faint thrum of machines behind us and the quiet hiss of the heating vent. The client in the waiting chair nodded slowly. The other tilted her head in quiet agreement. Even Mia didn't blink. Vanessa stood frozen for a moment. Then she spun around, grabbed her bag, and pushed through the door with a hiss of wind and frustration. The bell jingled behind her like punctuation. I didn't move, just let the air settle. Liam stepped forward and offered a small nod. "You handled that better than I ever could." "I've had practice," I said. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. "Rachel." Her voice came through clear. "Your story's spreading. And people aren't siding with her anymore." My mother said, "Just say sorry, Riley." I told her, "I'm not sorry. I'm free." The cafe was one of those quaint brunch spots with mismatched chairs and overhead bulbs strung like constellations. It smelled of roasted espresso and citrus marmalade. Outside, Seattle pressed gray and cold against the glass, December breathing frost into every corner of the street. Janice had chosen the table by the window, of course. The best lighting, the most visibility. She was already seated when I walked in, her coat folded neatly over the back of her chair, fingers wrapped around a teacup as if it anchored her. Vanessa sat beside her, staring into the distance, coat still on. I approached with steady steps and no smile. Janice looked up. "Riley," she said warmly, too warmly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded and sat down. No small talk. I waited. She cleared her throat, offering a polished smile. "With Christmas coming up, I thought it'd be good for us to move on, reconnect, let things settle." I let that hang. "You know how families are," she continued. "Things get heated. People say things they don't mean. But in the end, blood is blood." "Interesting," I said, folding my hands. "Because I remember you meaning every word when you told me not to come to Thanksgiving." She looked momentarily surprised, then softened her expression as if coaching herself back into control. "We all make mistakes." I leaned forward slightly. "I've made sacrifices for this family that none of you acknowledged. I've paid tuition, fixed broken heaters, covered bills, and all while being introduced as just family. I let it go. Every time. I let it go." Vanessa didn't speak. Her hands were in her lap, eyes on the table. Janice sighed. "You always forgive, Riley. You're the strong one." "Not this time." The words didn't explode. They landed like iron. "I'm not interested in performance reconciliation. Not to make you more comfortable. Not so Vanessa can save face. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not coming back to be erased again." Janice looked like she was about to argue. Then, as if remembering who was watching from nearby tables, she adjusted her scarf and said with forced lightness, "Well, maybe just a small apology to start fresh." I looked her in the eye. "I'm not sorry. I'm free." Silence fell between us, sharp and honest. I pulled my wallet from my coat pocket, placed 2 20s on the table, and stood. Vanessa didn't meet my gaze. She looked smaller than I remembered, not just in posture, but in presence. I didn't reach for a hug. I didn't say, "See you soon." I just walked out. Outside, the air bit through my coat, but I welcomed it. The cold no longer felt like rejection. It felt like clarity. Rachel stood nearby, leaning against the building with a takeaway coffee in hand. When she saw me, she stepped forward and wrapped me in a tight hug. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," she whispered. "You stood up for all of us." I smiled. It was overdue. Later that afternoon, back at the shop, I unlocked the front door and walked in alone. The scent of engine oil and clean metal greeted me like an old friend. I unpacked a small wooden sign from my bag and placed it at the front desk. Morgan and Company HVS. Built without apology. They still had each other. But now, I had myself. They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those we once stood to protect. Riley Morgan didn't grow up seeking applause, nor did she expect gratitude. She believed in work, in effort, in the quiet bond that holds families together. Not out of obligation, but from the love that fuels late-night repairs, tuition transfers, and showing up even when no one asked. But love, as she learned, cannot survive where respect has long been denied. The Thanksgiving she was cut from wasn't just about a dinner table. It was about an invisible hierarchy that had been built over years, where white-collar smiles were praised and blue-collar hands were hidden behind closed doors, where sacrifices were transactional and support was expected, not acknowledged, where image mattered more than character and family was a word used when convenient, discarded when uncomfortable. She had been used, financially, emotionally, and socially. Yet her greatest realization wasn't that they didn't value her contributions. It was that they never truly saw her at all. And so, she chose to stop asking for a seat and started building her own table. When her sister erased her from a holiday to impress strangers, Riley didn't retaliate with bitterness. She responded with clarity. She withdrew quietly, not to cause harm, but to stop bleeding for people who never once offered a bandage. She didn't make threats. She showed receipts. She didn't expose Vanessa through rage, but through undeniable truth. She didn't raise her voice in the shop. She raised a mirror. And the reflection changed everything. The mother who once saw Riley as a fallback plan came seeking a script for public redemption. But Riley had outgrown roles written by others. The sister who demanded sympathy found herself face to face with her own entitlement. And Riley? She stood not as the forgotten sibling, but as the architect of boundaries no longer up for debate. Her journey wasn't loud, but it was seismic. Because in a world that often romanticizes forgiveness without change, Riley chose something more radical: self-respect. She didn't ask them to understand. She didn't wait for them to apologize. She ended the story on her own terms. Not out of pride, but to protect the peace she had spent years funding for everyone but herself. Justice, when it comes, is rarely wrapped in applause. Sometimes it arrives in silence, through withheld support, a door left closed, or a name quietly removed from a bill. But its weight is undeniable. The lesson wasn't just for Riley. It was for anyone who's ever been treated as disposable. Anyone who's been asked to give more than they received, to stay small so others could shine. To those who've been the backbone behind family facades, only to be cast out when the spotlight came around. Riley's story reminds us, silence isn't always weakness. Boundaries aren't cruelty. And sometimes letting go is the loudest declaration of worth. Her choice wasn't vindictive. It was vital. Because there comes a moment in every life when we must decide, do we keep proving our value to those who benefit from undervaluing us? Or do we walk away, head high, hands steady, building a life where our presence is never questioned? In choosing the latter, Riley didn't just reclaim her narrative. She rewrote it. She didn't destroy her family. She simply stopped funding their illusion. And in that void, the truth echoed loud enough for even the most stubborn to hear. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. And those who once dismissed her? They may still dine together, rehearse apologies, rewrite history. But Riley? She's finally at a table of her own design. One built not from inheritance, but from integrity. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story hits somewhere deep, if you've ever been the quiet one holding everything together only to be pushed aside, subscribe and stay. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we reclaim them.